that you could merge with a demonic being, and that mergence was necessary for me to pursue the path that I'm on. And he actually saw himself as baby Jesus, right? So when he moved in, he was pushing Christianity at an exorbitant rate, to where he actually made himself fit into the prophecy as being the champion of the forces of light. And the prison officials forced him into the cell. Yeah, they actually forced us into that cell. So they actually were following prophecy as well.
That's Kevin Roby, the man who killed Lloyd Avery. After strangling Lloyd to death inside a prison cell, Roby would later use to describe carrying out what he believed were Satanistic rituals. And according to his own account, what happened inside the cell wasn't just murder. He believed it had a spiritual meaning. And that's truly unsettling. But maybe the most disturbing part of Lloyd Avery's story isn't what happened after he died. Maybe it's what happened while he was still alive. Because here, what doesn't make any sense. Lloyd Avery wasn't born into violence. He wasn't born into poverty or into any gangs. In fact, he grew up in one of the wealthiest black communities in Los Angeles called View Park. He even attended Beverly Hills High School, had loving parents, and had musical talent. Hollywood had already opened its doors for him. And here's where it gets odd. How does a young man with so much talent and opportunity end up sharing the last bit of his life in a prison cell with a Satanist called Kevin Roby? And the deeper I dove into this investigation, the weirder it got, because a lot of people started to blame Hollywood for his demise, while other people connected the gang culture that he was involved in caused it. And the further I went down the rabbit hole, I noticed that other people believed that the set of Boyz in the Hood was actually cursed to the men connected in it. Well, some of these are plausible explanations, but none of these explanations answer the question I couldn't stop asking. How does someone slowly become a person they were never supposed to be? Or maybe the real fatal detail wasn't actually the satanic killing inside a prison cell, but something a little bit more unsettling. It was the invisible transformation that began years before anyone noticed. And before we start talking about gangs, Hollywood, or the curse of Boyz in the Hood, I think we have to start somewhere else. So we have to figure out where Lloyd Avery really came from. Because if all you knew is how Lloyd Avery died, this is probably the last place you'd expect. This is View Park, a quiet hillside neighborhood, often referred to as the Black Beverly Hills. And many people don't realize that Lloyd's father actually owned a successful business. His mother worked in banking, and he attended Beverly Hills High School. He loved playing water polo, and he was amazing at writing music. While many people didn't know, he actually co-wrote and produced a track Push for Tisha Campbell's debut album in 1992. And believe it or not, some of his classmates were actually children of Quincy Jones, Smokey Robinson, and other successful black entertainers. So nothing about Lloyd Avery's childhood predicts what came next. In fact, if Lloyd Avery had actually grown up in Compton or South Central, this story would almost make sense. But he didn't. So something else had to have been happening below the surface.
In neighborhoods just outside the Los Angeles city limits, the sheriff's anti-gang unit also hits the...
While Lloyd was growing up, Los Angeles was actually bubbling below the surface. There was a crack epidemic, massive rising of gang violence, the Rodney King beating, then the 1992 Los Angeles riots.
Embedded in a dark part of the country's history, the LA riots. What we saw tore us apart, and much of what we saw from the air.
Many reporters...
For days, the city looked like it was totally coming apart. Smoke filled the skyline, businesses burned down, and trust collapsed. Millions of people watched this unfold on television across America. But something else was happening at the exact same time. Because gangster rap wasn't just selling records, or hood films weren't just telling stories. They were actually reshaping culture. And suddenly, toughness, survival, and street credibility weren't just realities for some people. They actually became symbols. And this is where Lloyd Avery's story starts asking some uncomfortable questions. Because Lloyd wasn't actually trying to escape that world, but he appeared to be moving towards it. But why? The obvious answer seems simple. Boyz in the Hood. Lloyd played one of the young gangsters responsible for one of the most unforgettable scenes in movie history. Millions of people watched that scene, and over time, it became the role Lloyd Avery would be remembered for. But here's the problem. Thousands of actors have played gangsters, yet none of them became one. So, the movie can't be the whole story. Which made me wonder, did Hollywood actually change Lloyd Avery? Or did something simply give him an identity he was already searching for? Because that's a very different question.
And so that's what the actor represents. It's a liar, fundamentally. It's someone who's acting out a deception. They're a persona in the Jungian sense. So the persona is the mask you wear in public, that you might even think you are, but you're not. It's this mask, and that's the actor, that's the persona. So
at this point, Lloyd Avery was just 23 years old, but on paper, everything appeared to be moving in the right direction for him. I mean, he wasn't just acting. He was making music, and Hollywood was opening the doors for him. Which raises another question. If Lloyd's career was really beginning to take off, why wasn't it just enough? Because if success is really what he wanted, he was already getting it. And that's when we started to wonder if maybe he wasn't just chasing success at all, but maybe chasing something much harder to define. Respect, authenticity, and identity. The early 1990s were changing the definition of what it meant to be real. Gangster rap wasn't just dominating music, and hood films were just entertaining audiences, but they were actually creating cultural icons. And suddenly, overnight, surviving violence actually carried status. Coming from the streets carried credibility, and being ordinary almost felt invisible. And that's where Lloyd Avery becomes really fascinating, because he wasn't just trying to escape that world. He appeared to admire it. But here's the thing. Admiration is very different from being a part of it. So, what happened next?
There's a new movie that really cuts to the heart of an American crisis. Boyz in the Hood. It is an important movie. This movie was written and directed by a young black man who is only 23 years old. He's with us today.
And in 1991, John Singleton cast a 22-year-old actor named Lloyd Avery II to play Boyz in the Hood. And here's the irony. Singleton didn't cast Lloyd because he was a gangster. He cast him because he looked convincing enough to play one. And the scene only lasts for seconds. A red Chevy, a double-barrel shotgun sliding out of a window, a couple shots, and Ricky falls. It became one of the most unforgettable moments in modern cinema. Millions of people watched it. Then the director yelled, "Cut." The camera stopped rolling, the crews packed up and went home, and the costumes came off. Except when I started looking at Lloyd Avery's life, something didn't sit right. Then, the timeline changes. He has new friends, goes to a new neighborhood, and has a totally new image. He begins spending more and more time in the jungle, a notorious blood neighborhood in South Central Los Angeles. And eventually, he tattoos jungles across his eyebrow. And here's where it gets odd, because tattoos usually don't change people. They just announce that something has already changed. So I started asking myself a different question. Now, at what point does playing a role stop being acting? I don't know. But when you lay out the timeline out, it doesn't look like one life-changing moment. It looks like one small decision after another. And maybe Boyz in the Hood didn't transform Lloyd Avery. Maybe it gave him simply a name to the person he was slowly becoming. And the more I kept digging, something very interesting came up. A moment that happened years before the murders, before prison, before the role in Boyz in the Hood, and before even he became a headline. It's a moment almost nobody talks about. And in 1998, Lloyd and several of his friends became involved in a violent altercation near UCLA. Police flooded the area, but Lloyd wasn't arrested for murder or accused of pulling the trigger. But he did spend several days in the county jail. And by itself, that shouldn't matter at all, because plenty of people spend a few nights in jail and come out and never hurt a soul. But then I found out something that actually made me stop. Because according to people who actually knew Lloyd, he didn't come out frightened. He didn't even come out embarrassed. He came out relieved. If anything, they said he came out different. More excited, more energized, and more drawn towards that world. And was this the moment everything changed? I could honestly say I don't know, but I don't think we should ignore it either. Because the more I looked into Lloyd Avery's life, the more I realized I wasn't looking for one dramatic turning point. I was looking for the first crack. And maybe this was it.
Get in! Wait. Let me explain, you guys. Get your motherfucking ass in the car.
And there's a question I've spent weeks living with. Why? Lloyd Avery already had one thing millions of people spend their entire lives chasing. And what boggles my mind is, why wasn't that enough? I mean, the obvious answer is, he just wanted to become a gangster. But the more you pry into his life, the less satisfied I became with that explanation. Because people don't usually destroy their lives just to become a label. They destroy their lives chasing what they believe that label would finally give them. And every story has a moment where the mask can no longer stay on. And for Lloyd Avery, that was the time the moment came. And it was on July 1st, 1999. And by then, the transformation I'd been following wasn't just a theory anymore. It actually had consequences. And that very afternoon, a confrontation unfolded on a South Los Angeles street. And according to prosecutors, Lloyd Avery was there. Then, gunfire. And when the shooting ended, Annette Lewis was dead. Percy Branch had been critically wounded. 3 weeks later, he died from his injuries. A jury would later find Lloyd Avery guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentence him to a life in prison without the possibility of parole. That's the official record, but it wasn't the answer I was looking for. Because those weren't just pieces of the biography, they were actually pieces of a transformation. The murders didn't explain who Lloyd Avery really was. They just revealed who he had become. And in prison, would change him all over again. And Lloyd was someone who read the scripture constantly in jail. He preached to other inmates, and he encouraged people to leave the gang life behind. And even some prisoners started to call him Baby Jesus. It was such a dramatic change that I couldn't ignore it. I kept thinking, was this a genuine repentance? Or was it a search for forgiveness, or possibly a way to survive in prison? Or something I'm overlooking entirely? But whatever the answer is that transformation would bring Lloyd face to face with one of the most disturbing people I've ever researched.
Blood just started gushing out of him, right? So I used the blood to wash down the walls to trap his spirit within the cell so it couldn't leave, so I could do the ritual on him. And then once the ritual was done, this ritual was to send a message to God that, this conflict, it was more so to send a message that he's next in the agenda. Once I'm completed with the things that I'm supposed to accomplish in this realm of existence.
Roby was already serving life without parole for murder and rape. He described himself as a Satanist. On September 4th, prosecutors say Roby strangled Lloyd Avery inside their prison cell. And what investigators found out afterward was unlike almost anything I've come across in researching this case. Because according to investigators and Roby's own statements, Avery's body remained inside the cell for more than 2 days before it was discovered. And during that time, Roby claimed that he performed ritualistic acts over Avery's body that he described as satanic. And eventually, prison staff entered the cell. Lloyd Avery was dead. And just like that, the man who spent years trying to become someone else was gone. And I often wonder, how does someone born into this type of opportunity spend a lifetime trying to become someone else? I mean, I was thinking maybe it was belonging, maybe respect, fame, or trying to find a new identity. I don't know. And I don't think anyone else truly does. But I do know this: Lloyd Avery didn't wake up one morning and become a gangster. It happened, one decision at a time. A friendship, the neighborhood, a role, a tattoo, and a reputation. Until one day, there wasn't much of Lloyd Avery left. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not simply how he died, but how completely he disappeared long before he ever even entered the prison cell. Because sometimes the most dangerous transformation is the one nobody notices until it's already complete.